This videotape is part of the Video Oral History Project of the Colony Public Library of the City of the Colony, Texas. This interview is with Wanda Gillett of 5053 Stanley Drive and Ann Beckel of 5104 Brandenburg Lane. Wanda is Department Manager for Retail Sales at the Mervyn Store in Carrollton. Ann is currently Director of Religious Education for Holy Catholic Church in the Colony. My name is Joan L. Sveinsson. I am an interviewer for the Colony Public Library Video Oral History Project. Wanda, will you please state your name and tell us something about your background, such as where and when you were born, where you grew up, places you have lived, your educational background, or any specialized training you have received?
I'm Wanda Gillett. We've lived in the colony 7 years. I'm a native Texan, born in Bishop, Texas, and I'm the oldest of 5 children. George and I have been married almost 25 years, and we've lived in lots of places because we were military for 10 years that we've been married, and we literally moved from coast to coast. We lived in Virginia on 2 different occasions. We lived in California, and then while he was overseas in Vietnam and the Philippines, I lived in Kingsville, so I was close to my folks with the children. I presently am employed at Mervyn's. I'm a department manager in the housewares department. That's a glorified title for a lot of hard work, but it is lots of fun and I do enjoy it. We moved to the colony because we wanted to. We were living in Dallas. We had been there for 3 years. We lived in a Fox and Jacobs home in Dallas and decided that we'd like to move out to the colony and for this to be our place of retirement and so forth, because he was getting out of the military. We have 3 children. 2 of them are grown and married and live in South Texas. And then our youngest one is still at home, and she's a freshman at Marcus High School.
What are the names of your children?
Gary's our oldest. Kathy is the second, and Terry Lynn is our youngest one.
Okay, thank you. You covered all my introductory questions. Thank you very much. Ann, would you please state your name and tell us something about your background, such as where and when you were born, where you grew up, places you have lived, your educational background, or any specialized training that you had?
My name is Ann Beckel. We are natives of Minnesota. We've sort of slowly started migrating south the last 10 years. We lived in Omaha for a year. And lived in Lincoln, Nebraska for about 6 years, and we've been in the colony 5. Job transfer brought us to Dallas with my husband's work. My background is in elementary education and library science. And I have taught 4th grade and 2nd grade and 6th grade over a period of 8 years. I've been a school librarian for, I guess, 3 years. And I received, while we were in Lincoln, I went to graduate school and received my master's in educational administration and endorsement in media there. And then from there we came down to the colony in March of 1980. And shortly after that I got involved in putting together proposals for a public library for the city.
And what brought you to the colony?
Well, when we got a transfer to Dallas, we looked around for houses, and this was the place we decided to move because the housing market was the best.
Tell us about your family.
Well, I have 3 children. Sarah, who is 7, and she's in 2nd grade. Rachel is 4. She'll start kindergarten this fall. And Martha, who is 3. She was born 2 months before the library opened. She's kind of as old as the library is.
Thank you. Your husband's name is?
Okay, my husband is Don, and he works in North Dallas for Insurance Services Office as the Assistant Regional Manager.
Okay. Wanda, how did you become interested in forming a Friends of the Library organization?
Well, Bill Longo who was a council person that's been very active in the colony, was really the motivating force that got all of us involved and started, because Bill is the kind of person that you can say, hey, how about, and he really gets the ball rolling. So he really did the initial groundwork to find out if it was feasible to do a library. And then he got to talking to several of us that had expressed interest in it and that had asked questions to see about, he said that the Friends was really the organization that needed to get started and to really push, and we needed a group that could gather facts and be a cohesive force or something to present to the council the information that we had gathered that we considered necessary to form a library. We had an introductory meeting in June of '80. We met at the Methodist Church, and that was when we decided that yes, we really did want a library. We had about 30 citizens present, and we decided to go ahead and elect officers that night, and I wound up president kind of as a process of elimination of the ones that really thought they'd like to be an officer. I was the only one that had ever been a president of anything before, and so they said, fine, you be president.
So you brought some experience to the process.
Yes. I've been very active in PTA work up until that time and had been past president when we lived in Dallas.
Okay, thank you. What kind of community support did you find?
Initially, we had a lot of support, but as with many things that get started in the colony, there's a lot of support, and then when it drags on, they kind of fall away. We started out probably with between 30 and 50 people that were really gung-ho, and then by the time it finally wound up that we made the last presentation that the council finally decided that they could support us and that they were willing to put forth the money to start a library, we had probably about 15 or 20 people.
How long did all this take, and what process occurred before the library was finally approved as part of the budget for the city?
Oh, it was 2 hard years. We met in people's homes for meetings. We met in the Methodist Church. We'd have we'd call a general meeting, and sometimes Ann and her husband and George and I'd be the only ones that'd show up. We had 2 other volunteers that worked with us that were real faithful too, Jeanette Larson and B.J. Rainier. So we could usually count on them being around. The 6 of us were really the ones, I guess, that you could say pushed the most. We'd have rap sessions with Don and Ann and George and I, and we'd say, well, we think we need to do this, and we'd take off on that tract. And then Ann wrote and got a lot of information through library systems, and we visited other libraries in the area to see what kind of facilities they had and see what we thought we would need, for very beginning basics. We talked about where could we have it. We even considered contacting the local railroad company and see if they would give us a boxcar or an old caboose that we could start our library in. Even that far back, they were talking about not using the fire station number 1 anymore, and we checked into that for the feasibility of converting that to a library. The biggest hurdle that we had to overcome was the monetary end of it, because in 1980 we had a tax revolt here in the colony that kind of slowed down the library process because of services that we wanted in the city, and because there's no commercial tax base out here, it all comes out of the citizens' pocket, and they were going to have a real big tax increase that year, and so we had some problems that way, so that the council just flat told us there was no way that they would even consider a library that way. But it was just a process that we just put down on paper what we thought we needed for basics, and then checking also with North Texas Library Services to see what requirements there would be for us to be included in that organization. And we just went to every council meeting there was. And every time there was a chance for citizen input, we input.
When did the city finally put the library in the budget?
It was June of '82.
June of '82 for the budget that would begin in October
Of
82. Yeah.
And when did the library actually open its doors?
So we opened in February February of '82. I think we got funding in '81.
You got funding in '81 for '82, and so
Okay.
when you open the doors, you were part of the city budget
Right.
process then.
We started with just volunteer books, though. People, donations, we had, we knew by that time that we were going to be in this space where we are now. And we had some Saturdays that we called Library Roundup Days, and just anything and everything that people wanted to donate, we accepted. They came in here with books and paper sacks and boxes and grocery carts, and come in staggering with huge armloads of books, you know, that they had cleaned out. A lot of them were books that we used just for count, that really weren't books that we knew that we couldn't put on the shelves, but we were after count as much as anything. But we got a lot of good donations from people too, that they just had them in their closets and decided that was a good way to get them out where people could use them and enjoy them.
And you were the first librarian here. What did you do with this massive influx of materials? How did you prepare them for the shelves? How did you deal with all that?
It was exciting, it really was. We, like Wanda mentioned, in December when we finally got in this facility, we had a lot of stuff stored in our garages for 2 years probably. So it was a real relief to get garages cleaned out, first of all. And then we said, just bring whatever you want. Saturday, December, I'm going to say 10th, I don't remember the date, but people did, and that conference room was just filled. It was stacked to the ceiling, and you couldn't walk through there. It was really, really great to see, that kind of support. Probably a lot of people did house cleaning too. A lot of stuff out there. I think they've been collecting too, because we kept saying, we're going to have a library, you save your books, and paperbacks, and whatever. And then I think instantly we started a book sale table, and got rid of a lot of stuff that way. And we sent off to Archive, I guess, for catalog kits right away to get the materials processed and start getting them on the shelf. And then we only had about 2 months before we opened to really get things on the shelves. The first big task was getting the shelving up, and I think we did that in January over a weekend period. It was like one Friday night, I remember being here till midnight while the guys were nailing the shelves in and putting everything up.
Were these the original type of shelving that you have, what you see in the library today, the Library Bureau shelving?
And that was one of the things that we said whenever we got started with it, that whatever city monies that we used, we wanted it to be something that would be an ongoing thing, and that when we knew that this facility would not be a permanent facility, that we could carry it forward and use it in other facilities.
So the city budget the first year went a lot for shelving and furnishings, that type of
Yeah,
material.
we didn't have any money for books at all the first year. And then we did go for a matching grant from North Texas for books, and I think we got $2,000 from that.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you mean when you say North Texas?
Okay, North Texas Library Systems is the part of the regional library systems for the state of Texas, in which we are a member of. And through that, we have received a lot of grant money, support for the professional staff, and video materials that we can check out for the patrons. And it's a real good program. That's something that we looked into right away 5 years ago.
Does this have something to do with going for count, as you mentioned earlier, Wanda?
Well, yes, because to be accredited by North Texas Library Association, when we had that Saturday call for books, we ordered catalog kits for her so that we could begin to put the packets together to, put the little envelope in the card that's the card holding envelope in the book, and some of the cards so we could start typing the names on the books, and so the books would be ready for circulation as soon as we were ready to open. We typed at home, and we typed at the library.
Late at night, a lot of people took stuff home and did typing at home.
That must have been hard to keep track of.
It was kind of a challenge. And then we had Sandy Durkee, who was the assistant librarian in charge of technical services. She did a tremendous amount of work in a very, very short period of time. It's unbelievable. She cataloged the books and get the things typed out. And then we have volunteers that would paste the labels in and spin labels on them. It got down to pretty much of a science, an assembly line type thing, in the conference room where the books were laid out. just kind of went down the line and processed the book. We opened up, we probably had, I was thinking nonfiction, maybe 3 or 4 books on a shelf, it looked real sparse. But there were things out and people did come in.
And when you first opened, the physical arrangement of this building was different, was it not? Could you talk a little about that?
We shared the space with the Park and Rec department, and what is the library director's office now was the Park and Rec office. And then this half of the library was divided into 3 small rooms that were each about 10 by 10. And one was shared by myself and the assistant librarian and about 30 volunteers. And then we had 2 smaller rooms that were divided into adult fiction and adult nonfiction. And in the hallway we had children's literature and juvenile fiction. So it was kind of chopped up, and it was kind of hard to supervise because you always had to go into the rooms and make sure things were okay. But we were just real glad to have a space and be able to be open.
Earlier you mentioned having a sale table. What's the purpose of the book sale, and where did the funds from that go?
That's a project, that's an ongoing project of the Friends. Books that we have that are duplicates, paperbacks that are not suitable to go on the shelves, or that are duplicates, or that have reached the point that they're really no longer serviceable, but that people could still enjoy reading. We have a table that we put them out, and I think we sell them like for 10 or 15 cents a piece. And this helps to bring money into the Friends. And then the Friends is a support organization for the library to provide the volunteers that Ann talked about that actually do a lot of the work. The librarian directs, and then they help, to man the checkout desk and get the books ready to go back on the shelves and things like that. But the monies, they buy things for the library that are not included in the budget, or that are little extras and things like that that would be nice to have, that are not necessary or that are not mandatory for the running of the library.
And how many hours were you open when the library first opened its doors?
We first opened, and I think I was paid for 10 hours a week, and the assistant librarian was paid for 10. I believe we stayed open 20 hours a week, and that involved Thursday night, and it was like 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours 4 other days of the week.
And closed on Monday.
And closed on Mondays, yeah.
That doesn't mean that's all the hours they put in, though.
Good point. Good point.
We were probably working about 60 hours a week the first couple months.
And to bring
Sarah,
Martha in her little carry-all and bring her up until she got where she wanted to run around. It wasn't really convenient to bring her so she could work.
And when you left the library, you went on to be director of education.
Well, I took off. When this job went to full-time, we got funding for that, I believe, a year and a half ago. And I quit in October of, I guess it was 83. I can't remember the exact date. And I did not feel I wanted to work full-time. I have, 3 small children, and I just, I couldn't handle it. So I decided to quit that, and then I took a year off and just last August started as director of religious education for our church. And that's a part-time job. It's kind of like the library in the situation. It's part-time pay and full-time work.
Back a little bit to the history of the library. There were some bond elections that the library was involved with. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the most recent one for the citizens decree, there were things that they wanted in the colony, and so the council, working with the library board of directors and with the Parks and Rec department and their volunteer board, and then some citizens that just rose up in arms, made a list of priorities, and they just worked on funding cost and what they thought it would cost, and took a bond package to the citizens, and all the objects on that bond election.
What do you see as the future for the library? Wanda?
Well, I think it can only grow, only be positive. We still have people out here that don't know we have a library, so it's an ongoing thing to let them know that we really do have a public library. And I think whenever we get our, quote, center of government all put together, when we get all of our new library and our new city hall building and the recreation building all centrally located, I think that's going to help too. But I see it only as growing and an ongoing thing.
Ann?
I guess for me it's personally exciting to think of something you were dreaming about 5 years ago is now going to be reality, and to see an actual library where people are going in and using it. Thinking of getting a lot of the services computerized and being able to have things on automation will be so much easier for everybody. Just the fact of the things that libraries can do, and the fact that, you know, we were part of it, and being able to start something from scratch is kind of exciting, and then to see, you know, the real thing materialize in such a very short period of time. You know, 5 years is not that long at all.
What do you see as your own role in the future of the library?
Definitely a user. I'm not as active as I was. I work now, and as most working mothers know, there's not enough hours in the day. George is more active than I am now because he is on the board, and while possibly that would be a role that I could serve in, I won't as long as he's doing it. So I am involved, even though I'm not physically here, because he brings home information, and we talk, you know, and so I know what's going on, and I'm involved in that respect.
Ann?
Well, I would like to continue serving as a member of the library board in an advisory capacity. I'm doing story time now, Tuesday mornings, so that way I still stay active, and I'm in here quite frequently to see what's going on. I'd like to continue in those capacities. Eventually, if there's ever a children's librarian, I would like to, you know, be involved and do that. That's probably a ways down the future yet.
Probably a little ways. There were some interesting points that came up when we were chatting before. One of them was about the history of our card catalog here. And I believe there's a story behind that.
Well, when we originally started out, we had our card catalog in shoeboxes, basically. They were kind of a gray box shaped like a shoebox and had a lid on it. And people could go through there and check and see what we had in the collection. And it got to be where it was rather tedious, and quite a few shoeboxes, so I was at an antique shop in Louisville a couple years ago and found this particular card catalog there. It was an old antique one that the dealer was trying to get rid of, and so we talked and dickered, and I says, well, I can get a new one for this, you know. And he says, well, I can sell you this one for this much. So we dickered back and forth again, and I finally got him down to a little bit lower than what he was trying to sell it for. Then it ended up, it dawned on me that I didn't know how to pay for the thing. You know? I had this good deal and this good price and a nice set of drawers, but no money. So, well, I'll go out on a limb and I'll write out a check, and he took my check, and that was no problem. And I came back and I talked to the city manager about it, and he says, well, I don't think we can authorize that much spending. So I called Wanda up real quick, and the Friends ended up paying for that, I believe. And
About how much was it, just out of curiosity?
I think it was $500.
Woo!
Yeah. And that was a little coarse marital discussion on that one, too. We weren't real sure we needed to buy a card catalog.
Don't jeopardize.
My husband said, get reimbursed quick.
Understandable reaction. How do you see that the facilities and the collection here has changed over the 3 years? Is it pretty much what it started out to be, or have there been some changes?
I think the biggest change we note is the reference collection, the addition of that, and the fine materials that we have in those areas. We started out and you rely on donations. We got a lot of children's books, a lot of adult fiction, but very little nonfiction or reference. So that was something that had to be purchased.
I think our first set of reference books was Mr. Perot's set of encyclopedias that out of his personal library. Some somebody in the colony knew somebody and contacted, and that's how we got a lot of early donations.
Which set of encyclopedias was that, do you recall?
Well, that was Britannica.
Is that the set that's on the shelves now?
I can't remember. It was, I think it was either a 74 copyright or something like that.
We'll have to take a look.
Probably still the same one.
Not real current, but it was just like brand new.
Yeah.
Something he'd had in his office.
Are there any other interesting donations you'd like to mention that you can recall?
Well, one lady, when we first opened, gave us $500
Ooh.
with the stipulation that it all be spent on children's books. That was probably the biggest cash donation we got. We received $100 from other different individuals, and they were all stipulated for children's books.
But then didn't we have one invalid lady that you had befriended that gave us some money for adult books also after the children's selections were growing quite well, and she had read everything we had and had read everything in the surrounding libraries. And Ann, I don't remember how Ann.
Well, I worked at the Louisville Public Library one summer, and I met her through there. She used to live up on Pruitt Street, I guess, and fell down and broken a leg, so I was shuffling books back from the Louisville Public Library to her house, just delivering them for her so she could read. And then it ended up that we started our library here, and she says, "Do you remember me?" She came in one day, and I said, "Well, sure, how you doing?" And she says, "I'm fine, and here's a check." And I just was completely for her. She says, "That's for thanking you for bringing books back and forth for me." And I was real amazed, because I didn't think I'd done anything that great. It was just dropping books off at her house. But she ended up giving us a total, I think, of around $1,000.
Oh my goodness.
It was really, really a neat lady. She unfortunately died a couple years ago.
Are there any further comments either of you would like to make about the library, about your involvement with the community? Have there been other activities in the community that you've been involved with that you'd like to mention at this time?
Well, George and I have been involved, I guess, ever since we've been out here. That was one thing we liked when we came out here, was that it was small enough that you knew a lot of people, and you could get to know, you knew everybody really for a while. Of course, it's grown now to where you don't know everybody, but we've been involved with 4th of July committees, and that was a lot of fun. Getting rained out one year, we had some bands here with all their electronic gear, and you should have seen us trying to get all of that under a tent so it didn't get wet. I've been on one of the Colony Goals committees about 3 years ago to help set short-term goals. And it's nice to see some of those come to fruition. The swimming pool was one of the things. We did a survey out in front of Winn-Dixie. That was the only really place to shop here at that time. And the swimming pool was the #1 concern that people had at that time. And to see that's one of the things that's going to be on that passed with the bond election that hopefully in a year or so we'll have. And the library. And roads was a big concern for people at that time that we were doing that, and of course 423 has been reworked and made into a 4-lane road. The light at 423 and 121, and George and I were talking the other day, we didn't have any lights on 121 at any of the intersections when we moved out here 7 years ago, and you used to take your life in your own hands when you tried to make the turn at Old Denton Road and 121. And boy, it's a breeze now because you've got turn signals and arrows that make it easier for you to turn. So there's been lots of changes, and like I said earlier, we're here because we want to be, and it's exciting to see how things are changing and growing.
Ann, you want to comment any on your involvement with the city other than the library?
I think the library's probably been the biggest involvement I've had with the city. I've worked on, short-term type things. The Colony Fun Fest was one of them, and different July 4th activities. But that was probably the main thing I've worked on for the city.
And then most recently your work with the church?
And most recently now I'm working with our church, where our church is also starting a building program.
Okay. I want to thank you both very much for participating with our project, and I think in our introduction I forgot to mention today's date, so I would like to say that today is Wednesday, May 8th, 1985. Thank you both very much.